So we're gonna do something a little bit different today. We're gonna do kind of a panel of asking someone in recovery some of the most common questions that families have about recovery. So Cammie's in recovery, Chris is in recovery. They both are my guinea pig volunteers. They're willing to let us ask them questions. And I've got some pre-formatted questions and some pre-formatted answers from other people in recovery as well that you can read through as we talk. My hope is that we get your questions answered. So whatever questions you may have or have had, this would be a great time to come up with those and ask them, in addition to some of the most common questions that people ask. And for this sake, we're going to go over common questions people have in early recovery, like before someone comes to treatment, and then common questions someone has when they're in recovery, in treatment, and then when they're leaving treatment, how to manage that when that happens. We've got our panel experts, Cammie and Chris Avery, on with us today. So before I jump into the general questions, let's just start with any questions that any of the families already have, and then we can go from there. So I think Gordy mentioned he had a question he wanted to get off his chest, unless I heard him wrong. Maybe it was Jeb.
Yeah, it was Gordy. My question revolves around post, or well, after my son's been through all the treatments and everything, and all the classes and learnings and all that. My question is now, when do I start worrying if he doesn't appear to be kicking in? He's always tired, hard. It's hard for him to get motivated. And I guess my question is, when do I worry and when do I step in, if at all, to help him again? He just is tired and exhausted all the time.
So Chris or Cammie, whichever one feels well, you just jump in.
Cammie's going to go first. I can tell. Look at her; she's chomping at the bit. Go, Cammie.
Well, and let me clarify. He did. He started his recovery process back on March 27th, and he graduated from I Am Recovery just very recently. But he also went through 30 days at another location, the Cirque. And so, yeah, that's just a little background on where he is, and I'm wondering where am I now?
Okay. I was just thinking back to early recovery when it was difficult for me. I do remember being exhausted. I remember isolated. I remember having a hard time reconnecting in society because it was unfamiliar, right? So the drug use and the addiction was what I knew for so long. I didn't really remember or know how to do things differently. So the isolation, I think when you say when is an appropriate time to step in, anytime. I go alongside while he's in treatment, when he's out of treatment, anytime you have concerns. It was never a bad thing when people would check on me. It was never a negative thing. I felt loved and cared for. I mean, at times, maybe annoyed that you're not exactly where you want to be, because being in isolation for so long and then coming back into society and connection is so uncomfortable that I had to learn how to connect with people and relearn how to do things for myself. But I don't think that there's like a bad time or a set amount of time that, well, you should wait a little bit before you say anything. If you're concerned, I think ask. But it is a real thing. It is real to feel exhausted when the drugs controlled so much of your hormones in your body and all of your dopamine and serotonin levels. Getting that all back level was kind of a process. So I think that it does take time. It takes a lot of time, actually. It took me a lot of time. I'll speak for myself. It took me a long time to be able to get going again. But the more people that I was able to connect with and the more importance I found in my life. So I guess my job was really helpful to me. My friends were really helpful. Well, I didn't have any friends in the beginning, but my family, and then going to recovery events like NA or Addict to Athlete or Sober Softball or all these community events where I could meet people and start reconnecting. It kind of helped me get out of that funk.
Do you mind telling me how long for you was a long time? Are we talking about months? Are we talking about years?
Well, that's a great question. I would say, as far as being depressed and isolated and not really getting going, it was a couple months. It took me proving to myself that I could get up, that I could go to work, that I did have value, that I had something to offer. But it took practice and me showing up for myself before I was able to see that I had importance and value in this world. And that took months. But as far as rebuilding connections, for example, my family, I'm still doing that. I have 5 years in recovery and I'm still working on my relationships. Not that they're still damaged or view me as an addict, but because I took so much time away, I'm learning about them in the years that I would have had I not been using. I know that's not like a super specific timeline, but for me, it did take, I'm still working on it. I'm still learning about myself. I'm still learning about my values. I'm still learning about what I can give back to this world. But I think if you feel like it's excessive, like maybe a little too dark or a little too isolated, or maybe you'd like to see him a little more, I had a plan in place, and I'm assuming if he's done treatment, he had a relapse prevention plan. Maybe not. But if he did have a relapse prevention plan, in there were indicators of, if I start isolating or if I start hiding or if I don't, I want you to
put it on mute.
Pre-treat. I don't know if he has those plans in place with you, but I think having a conversation wouldn't hurt.
Thank you, Cami. That was great feedback. How about you, Chris? Do you have any follow-up to that? Or
yeah, I think I just have a few things to add, Gordy. And I know we've talked about some of this in the past a little bit, I think. To me, I want to go back to pause, right? And in looking at the timeline, I think we all like it to be quicker than it normally is. Yet it can take, some people are quicker, some people take a few months, and some people can take up to 2 years to really regain, as Kenny said, their hormonal levels, the chemicals that are being released in their brain levels. I personally think it took me about 6 months. But I still would say that, to just say that would be a guesstimate. And I think it's so hard to nail any of this stuff down to one specific date where you just go the switch was off and now it's on. And I think, I want to reinforce what Cami said. And I think it's the most important thing is, how do you, with love in your heart, reach out to somebody and let them know it's not a point of worry that they're necessarily using, but a point of how do we help you how do we help you feel better about yourself? What does he want or she want? And then how do we help them with a loving connection, move in that direction?
Does depression and anxiety add to the recovery time?
I think it changes the recovery. Because anxiety is a central nervous system, the body reacts to something, and we have to learn how to react differently. So from my perspective is I don't know that it lengthens the time. It just changes the experience. And Jared probably can answer that better, and Cami can probably answer that better. That's just from my ignorant perspective.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah, I mean, I see anxiety and depression pain playing its own monster role in lots of people's lives, whether there's addiction or not addiction. It doesn't necessarily mean that that person's going to relapse or go back to addictions. But what I do hear saying is we need to make sure we're trying to balance out our care or whatever we're doing post recovery. So on a client side, I'm always going to encourage them to work a recovery program, even if they're out of treatment. So that might be going to meetings, might be connecting with spirituality weekly, daily, might be having a sponsor, might be going to a nutrition coach to help balance out some of those things naturally, some of those anxiety and depression levels. I continue to encourage people to keep working on their life to help with those pause or post-acute withdrawal symptoms as long as possible. But I think it's you also got to trust yourself. If you're feeling like something just feels a little off or not right, going back to kind of Cammie's feedback on that is, are you in a position where you can have a open dialogue and say, hey, my gut's just kind of saying something. Is there something? You know, keeping it kind of real that way as well. All right. Anyone have any other follow-up to that question or have additional questions that's on your mind before? This is your time.
Try it again.
No.
So there's a common question that kind of goes along with what Gordy was saying. I think this would be a good one to ask the panel. Does the family need to change so that you can be okay? So you've left treatment. Do they need to change so that you can be okay? So that's kind of the question I have for the panel. And if you're ready, go ahead. Otherwise, I can give you some other people's responses that they've had from this question as well.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I'm sitting here thinking of, did my family need to change? And I would say yes, they did. I would say that in the time that I was active in my addiction, I did a lot of damage, and there were a lot of resentments or maybe anger or hurt feelings. And for me to be able to make those amends was really important to help those family relationships. But yes, I think that they need to change and be patient and understanding. I was really lucky to have a family that was supportive. I was really lucky to be one of the ones that had family members that were on my side cheering for me. But I know that's not always the case. And now in recovery, they did change. They forgave. They showed up more when I was willing to show up for myself. Then it made more of a difference when we're both making an effort in the same direction. Expecting them to change is a different thing, though. I think that all the change that I had to do was inside of myself. All the healing that I needed was inside. I just wasn't able or had the ability to tap into that. Once I was able to tap into that, I had a lot more changing to do than they did. And I couldn't expect them to heal on my terms because it was my turn to heal. And they all came around at different times. I'm grateful for the change, but expecting it, I don't think you can expect it, but
Thank you, Cammie.
Yeah.
Anyone have any follow-up questions to Cammie's response? And if you don't, Chris, do you have anything to add?
Gordy, do you have you're muted if you have a question and I see your mouth moving.
Sorry, there, I was. Cami, did you know what you needed to do to heal?
Not until I was doing it, practicing it. For me, it was a huge practice. I learned all the skills in treatment so I could tell you what I needed to do. But then getting out of treatment and into the real world and learning to implement them was different than just knowing. So it was a practice for me. I had to practice showing up. I had to practice with my relationship skills. I had to practice self-love. And I knew it from treatment, but I didn't learn it until I went through the process of doing it, if that makes sense.
But you feel like you were given all the tools and everything you needed during treatment to be able to
Yeah, I do. I felt like I had, so in my experience, just to go back a little bit in the story, I had to go through my treatment program twice. The first time I learned the skills and I could read them to you verbatim, but I wasn't applying them and my behaviors were not following in alignment with what my words were saying. So what I would say and what I was still doing in my behaviors were different. And so the second go round, I had to do my treatment again. I learned a lot about myself and about practicing those and what that looks like. Because you're not always responsible for the way that people respond, but you are responsible for your part of it. And so I feel like, yes, I did learn all the tools. They gave me everything I needed while I was in treatment. But when your behaviors are all you know for so long, hearing someone say what you need to do differently and then practicing doing something differently is kind of a different ball game.
Okay.
Jared, will you just repeat the question one more time for me?
Did your family need to change for you when you were in recovery? So after you were in recovery, did they have to change for you?
So I think there's just an inevitable change that happens. I think I learned from my own journey there's no way to get somebody else to change. Changing is hard enough for myself. And I want to almost go back to Gordy's question of, I think the biggest challenge I found was, like, do we have all the tools to heal? And I would say, again, like, it was hard for me to understand every level of healing. And I would say, I don't think that journey ends for most of us. I think it's like layers of an onion, right? If you cut it and you rip off one piece of you realize, man, there's more onion underneath. And to me, it's multiple layers. And sometimes, and I mentioned this, like, I was molested as a kid and then I have a daughter and somebody was watching our daughter and it totally hit me in a new way of like, bringing back, like, I thought I healed from it and I thought like everything's good, but then that triggered me in a way and I cried and I was hugging my wife and I said, that clearly there's something still for me to work on. So I think we get to learn tools as we go, but I don't think it's not a simple math equation. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. I wish it was. It'd be easier for most people to heal. Yet I think the family, when they start to see the person that's coming from addiction and is in recovery now differently, then the family just changes, not necessarily that they grow a ton or that they change a lot. They change the way they see you and interact with you. And I think that was the change that my family made that helped me the most, is my parents' anxiety went down vastly of like, am I going to drink again? Right? Am I going to do drugs again? And they had to worry much less like, hey, it's in the house. Or if I'm staying, like I go back to Phoenix as I'm living in Utah now, do I go back and do they have to worry about me? Can they have a drink around me? And I think those type of things became like, I think just the nicest way to say it is more trust was rebuilt. And I think that changes the dynamic of our relationship.
I think that goes well with another one of the most common questions. if you're someone who does drink and your person in recovery, how long until I can have a drink with them? So, Chris or Cammy, what's your thoughts?
First, or do you want me to go first?
Go for it.
Okay. So I'm never going to have a drink again with my parents. That was even hard for my mom to accept at one point. She's like, man, it really sucks. We can't go on vacation and have a drink. And I said, I get like that sounds nice on paper. I mean, if I'm understanding the question correctly, and if I'm not, Jared, stop me.
No, that's right. It's can they have a drink with you? Can they sit down and drink and you drink together?
Yes, I will drink water and they will drink whatever alcoholic adult beverage that they want. And I will watch them enjoy that. And I'm going to enjoy remembering the dinner, remembering our conversation, not being angry, not blacking out. And I'm going to enjoy the time we have together. But I most certainly will never have another drink with my parents again. And I'm not choosing them. I'm not going to have a drink with anybody because it's again, for me, I wish I could tell you like I could have one drink. My drink ends when the bottle is empty. And that was a tough life for me. And like it was like I'm gonna get emotional, but it was so dark that like it ended up not how many drinks did I have, it ended up with passing out. So no, I will never have another drink. It was hard for them to accept that, but they've become so happy and grateful for how my life has gone now. That they don't it's not even a conversation anymore. That was more in the first like year or two. And like drinking adds no value to my life. It adds no value to me connecting with them. Like I really don't want to even say that it would because I don't think it would. So to me, no, that's never going to happen. Simple answer is that won't happen and it's not going to happen.
Question.
Go ahead, Jed.
So I'm going to assume that at some point that wasn't okay. It wouldn't have been okay with you if your parents had a drink. Like how long did it take you before you felt like, oh, gee, I don't care if they drink or not. It's not going to make any difference to me. It's more important to me than it is to them.
For me, and again, this is not, I don't know this is going to be a standard answer, Jeb. For me, it was almost instantly. Because I needed to have, and I'm probably a weird person, but I wanted to prove to myself that I could not drink even when they drank. So they were much more hesitant about it than I was in the beginning. So I would say it probably took about a year for them, and you know, it took a year for them to even bring it up. And I just said like, hey, if you guys want to drink wine or whatever else you can drink, like I'm not going to drink. So I would say it took about a healthy year for them to be okay drinking in front of me. But I just said like, you drinking doesn't trigger me to drink. That's not what caused me to drink, right? Like I'd love to say, hey, if my parents just stopped drinking in front of me, I would have stopped drinking. That just wasn't the case. So it's not, for me, it wasn't as much of a trigger as people thought it would be, right? Like, and I'm going to be honest, like I don't want them to use drugs and stuff. Like my parents don't use drugs besides drinking. Like they don't use that in front of me. I wouldn't want that. But for alcohol, it's just such a common thing in our society that really there's no way to get around it. Even living in Utah, you go out and people are drinking. And that's not a trigger to me. It's what I related alcohol and the reason I used alcohol that was what would trigger me. And so I had to be more aware of our conversations, our communication, our disagreements, things like that would be triggering to me, less than them drinking in front of me.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you it's a great question. All right, Cammy, now you tell them everything that they need to know.
I think our experiences are different, so it's helpful for me to hear your point of view. Two things came to mind. One, when I was in early recovery, my boyfriend was still drinking, and I lived with him. And so I would go to IOP, these intensive therapies. I would be working really hard on my recovery and then come home and try to practice these skills with him with liquor on his breath. And that was really difficult for me. and in early recovery, I ended up drinking with him. It was like a bad day. He said, "You're fine. I'm fine. I'm not in treatment anymore." And I did get severely triggered by having him make a cocktail every single night. So I had to learn for me in my process that I couldn't be with someone who drank every day. So I had to leave that relationship in order to fully work my recovery because it was too triggering. And the other thing that comes to mind, I have a brother that now drink or has drank. He's been an alcoholic his whole life. And my older brother I've always been very close with him, and we always bonded over drinking. And so when I stopped drinking, our relationship changed a little bit because I didn't meet him at the bar or have cocktails at his house. So we had to do different things. A couple weekends ago, I was up in St. George with all of my brothers, and he was having a beer. That didn't trigger me at all. I was just glad he showed up. I'm glad that he's there connecting with the family because I would isolate in those times. So now I'm okay with it. I think for me specifically, it depended on the level of recovery. If I early in recovery, I couldn't. But now I'm okay. I'm okay if my brother drinks. I'm just happy he's there. I'm just happy we can connect. I would not enter a relationship with someone again who drinks just because it's too risky for me to see it every day, all day in my cupboards, in my home. So those are the two examples that came up to me. It definitely depended on where I was in myself. And now I'm okay with it. But this is years later. When I was fresh out of recovery, it was really, really hard to sit there and watch other people drink in front of me.
I also want to second you, Cammy, of like, I wouldn't want, like, luckily my wife doesn't drink. I wouldn't want it in my house every day. Like, there's just too much, it's like, hey, if I'm a fat kid and I love candy and you're like, never eat candy again. And like, I'm living with people that just eat candy all day. Like, eventually I'm going to go like, oh, I should try a little bit. Oh yeah, no, that's still not healthy for me. So I agree. I wouldn't, like, I don't want to live at my parents' house, first of all, because I don't want to live with my parents and I'm them. But beyond that, like, they have liquor there, and my stepfather drinks quite almost every day. And I don't want that just because I don't think I would drink. But you just, like, life happens. Things happen. And it's just too easy to go back to that negative coping tool. Because sometimes it's just easier than to, like, go through the process. As Gordy said, like, how do you heal? Like, to go through the healing, to feel triggered, and then have to go like, man, what am I going through right now? That's a lot of energy and work. And sometimes it's easier to go grab the bottle, if I'm going to be honest.
So to kind of follow up to those two questions is, do families need to get rid of the alcohol from the house, the prescription drugs that are easily accessible, the triggers? Do they need to get rid of those things when someone's coming out of treatment and either coming home or being around them a lot?
I would say yes. In early recovery, I mean, the medications, just keep them locked. I think the alcohol, if you could just be cognizant of what they just went through. And like Chris said, it's a coping skill, right? Like, drinking is a coping skill, and it's one that worked for me to escape some of my pain. So if I was in a painful situation, staring at it day after day, it would be difficult not to. Forever, no, I don't think it's on all the family members and all the community to lock everything up. Oh, Cammy's coming over. Let's make sure that, that's my work. That's my process. I have to be confronted with it at every restaurant I walk into. So I have to learn my own coping skills and my own tools to keep my own self safe. But I think in early recovery, yeah, I think it would be nice to not have to be faced with it day after day after day. Just to be mindful of them, but it's not their job to keep me safe. It's my job to keep me safe.
I'm gonna second Cammy. Like, so I again, she said, I think our experiences are different. I got sober in the same house that I drank in for almost 17 years, in the same bedroom. So my parents didn't get rid of the alcohol, and I'm not blaming them, but like, it made it easier because after a certain time I couldn't buy liquor. When I decided like, oh, I'm not going to drink tonight, and then I gave in to that when I was first working on getting sober, it took me a long time to resist that temptation. Maybe I'd get 2 weeks, maybe I'd get 60 days sober, and then I'd have that temptation again. And it was easy to find it because it was right downstairs or in their big liquor cabinet. So to me, I think, Cami, if you're willing to get rid of those things, lock them up, whatever, I think that's extremely helpful to somebody, especially when they're new in sobriety. It would have helped me. Yet I will say with liquor, it's easy to find if you really want to. So I think helping people, being a safe place for them, being a safe place for them to come talk to you when they're struggling, if they're open to it. I'm starting to set up new ways to have those kind of conversations are extremely, just as I will say, unlocking the box of communication is just as helpful and useful as locking the box of liquor or drugs. And I think if you can do both, it's a stronger winning combination. I'm looking at percentages. You'll get a higher percentage of return on your dollar if you lock and unlock. But yes, it most certainly would have helped me to not have the liquor in the house. And luckily at some point after I got sober, I stayed in their house for 6 months, even after I got sober. And luckily I was able to refrain from using their alcohol like I did in the past.
We don't live in the same state as our son. And it's come, like holidays are coming up. We've got a grandchild being born. Our son's expressed interest in meeting his baby niece, but we, to this point, have been a little hesitant about inviting him into a family event where there would be opportunity to drink, and I don't know that the whole, extended family would embrace, well, nobody's going to drink when he's here, so it's actually made us isolate Dan a little, our son, a little more than maybe, I'm comfortable with. It's just like, I don't.
Yeah, I have a different opinion than that.
You want to share your different opinion?
Oh, well, I don't think not including Dan in holiday stuff is about him trying to keep him from drinking, or it's that we're afraid he's going to have a meltdown, again, like a meltdown in front of all the kids. In fact, all the parents of our grandchildren have made it really clear that that they should have an input as to whether Dan gets included, and to this point, their input has been no, not yet.
I'm happy to give my opinion on that. And I know everybody's situation is different. I think include him. I think that including family, give him the option, I guess you should say, if he feels like he could come. I think having hard conversations before, like, maybe let's not put all the alcohol out on the kitchen table. Maybe let's keep it in a cupboard. And what can we get you to drink? What will you enjoy drinking that we can have here for you? Or maybe just some suggestions. So you're laying it out before, like, hey, there's going to be alcohol here. We're not going to have a full bar of cocktails right in front of your face, but he knows that you guys drink. And I think that if he had the option to spend time with you and not spend time with you, he'd probably want to spend time with you. But if he gets himself in a situation where the conversations aren't had before, then maybe that could be tricky. Maybe if he just walked into it, it would be more triggering. But if you were able to say, hey, there's going to be alcohol here, we'll keep it in the fridge. Is that something you're comfortable with? Are you comfortable coming here knowing that we're going to drink at Christmas? Or then it kind of clears up some of the unknowns so he's not blindsided, is a suggestion.
So this is one of the common questions that has been asked is, do we need to tell the whole family not to drink around them? A therapist in recovery, he says this: there's a fundamental mistaken assumption underneath these questions that the family has to get it just right or everyone involved does. They're going to recover if they choose to. If you want to be helpful, work on your own recovery. Go to your own meetings, get counseling, and show up in the relationship as your best self. So the way I interpret that is essentially, you're not going to get it right, and they're not going to always get it right. But we want to give them a choice to continue to choose into family, or choose not to come, or choose to make it different. However, but we can't control it. We can't control if they come over and they relapse or they freak out. We can deal with the consequences or the communication box.
Well, the other thing we want to make sure is that he actually leaves when it's time to go back on a plane.
Well said. Well said. Here's another question that I think is one that's on a lot of families' minds. When can we get back to normal and put all this addiction stuff behind us? So, Cammie, Chris, do you have any feedback on either of those, on that question?
So when can we put all the addiction stuff behind us?
Yeah, when can we get back to normal and just put it all behind us?
I mean, for me, 17 years of using, that was normal. That was the normal. So I don't want to go back to normal. I want to move forward. Like I don't want to look back. And I think to me, it's about how do we grow better together. So I don't think there was like, again, some of these questions seem like, hey, we met the finish line, and then life is just now, everything was this way on this side of the fence, and now we're on the other side of the fence. And I'll say, to me, like it just, life isn't that way. Okay, it said unstable, but it ain't going away. I think life is more about how do we keep finding a way to move forward, and how do we let go of more of the past. So I don't know if it's a putting away or it just completely dissolves itself. I just think there's a natural progression that happens as I continue to build trust. And in a sense, before I was married, my now mother-in-law said, hey, I know you've had all this stuff in your past. Like, how do you tell me it's never going to happen again? And I said, I don't ever tell you that. Like, I don't tell you that I'm not going to have issues with porn. I'm not going to tell you I'm not going to drink again. I'm not going to do drugs again. I'm just not. I said, I can prove that to you over time, but I can never tell you it's not going to happen again. And the truth of the matter is, I'm going to wake up today and I'm going to do my best to go to bed, staying away from those temptations, living a better life. Yet I won't tell you that, like, it's just gone forever. It's just we think about it less and we talk about it less, because it's now been almost, literally in a couple of days, it'll be 7 years. And 17 years, now 7 years, nobody thinks about it anymore. The only thing we think about is like, hey, we're proud of you, or like, hey, it's amazing that it's been 7 years. Yep, it is amazing. And that's the conversation. And then we just go on because life is now different. And that's the new normal.
I agree wholeheartedly, Chris. I think that the new normal, going back to normal, is never going to be an option again. That normal life was not healthy and conducive to the highest version of myself. My new normal is, like he said, today I'm willing not to. Like, I can't promise you forever, but I can promise you that my life is significantly better without substances. And our new normal is creating healthier relationships. And but I don't think, when you said, Jared, when does all this addiction stuff go away? It doesn't. For me, I'm always going to have to abstain. For me, I'm always going to have to choose to be who I am today. And that's by keeping myself and my space safe, and my people safe, and my people on my side. I mean, not that they don't have to drink, but they know how to help me stay safe. So I don't think that the addiction piece ever goes away, and I don't think that normal is an option, but new normal, I will definitely second Chris on all of that.
So for family that are still thinking about questions, we have some preset questions, but I also, if you have a question, please jump in and ask any question. You've got a panel of Chris Avery and Cami Sandel, both in recovery, both doing really good work in their recovery. Please utilize them if you have questions. Otherwise, I'll continue to ask questions from my list. So here's a big one that's really a common one that families ask is, how can I help? Now that my loved one's in recovery, how can I help? How can your family help you, Cami, Chris, early recovery, or in treatment? Go back in time, get in your time machine while you're in treatment and early recovery. How could they help you?
By doing their own work, for showing up for themselves, by modeling what healthy interactions look like, by doing their own therapy, because whatever we went through was bad enough that I turned to drugs or substances. I think for me, my family doing their own work and taking a look at themselves helped me significantly, because then they were able to model, this is what trust looks like. You put a marble in the jar, and every time you keep adding them, then you have a full jar of trust. It's like one baby step at a time. But that was what was most beneficial for me in early recovery. And the support, I have to say, I'm proud of you goes a long way. We didn't do it for them, or maybe we did in the beginning, but in the end, we learned how to do it for ourselves. And to hear someone say, I see you, and what you did matters, what you do matters, goes a long way.
I love that response. I'll just give my 2 cents, and it'll be short. I think I don't need a silent partner in the situation. I need a partner. So I think, thinking that we're just going to sit around and not ruffle my feathers, it's just not healthy. There's stuff that, as Cami said, do your own work, but doing your own work is part of doing work together in a sense. So I think the more somebody can open up space and have those courageous conversations. I like courageous conversations. I think it's important for us to have. And, there's been hurt, I'm sure, on both sides. So the more we can sit down and understand we're going to have some of those conversations together, it helps a ton. And I think that's really the main thing, is those courageous conversations, understanding, like Cami said, I'm proud of you, or, what do you need right now? It's a simple question. How can I support you? What do you need? And sometimes we just need somebody to listen. Sometimes we need we're proud of you. Sometimes it's nice for us to also say, hey, we're proud of you, because we are.
How do you keep that support from turning into enabling? How do you recognize the difference as a parent, a family member, a spouse? How could you help them recognize the difference? Yeah?
I can tell you how Chris has helped us.
Please share.
Yeah.
Let him own his successes. Let him own his failures. It's been...
don't be the fixer.
Yeah. Don't rush in and try to solve things. And again, we live in Florida, right? So it's not like we're at the ready. Dan, our son, did live here for several years, and it, sometimes he'd just show up at our doorstep and in the middle of the night or something. And one time we dropped him off at a homeless shelter, and he was stunned that we weren't going to, invite him into our swank beachfront condo, So we just learned how to, it's not our circus, not our monkeys. An emergency for him doesn't necessarily mean an emergency for us.
We're still learning.
It's, an emotional challenge, more for me. I'm his mom. But I think that's been a significant change in how we've responded to him over the last 2 years. Probably the last 6 months has been, the most loving detachment. And, like Cammie said, we're proud of you. You know, we trust you to handle this. And he said, what am I going to do, Mom? I don't know, but I know you'll figure it out. You know, and meanwhile, I'm like freaking out. I don't know what you're going to do. And then I say, call Chris.
Susie, go ahead.
I mean, I'm Susie, by the way.
Hi, Susie.
Sorry, I haven't been able to get on. So my son is Lincoln, and there's a few things that we've learned. One of them is, I actually don't say I'm proud of you. For some reason, Link feels like he has to earn proud. So I tell him that I am happy for him. I'm happy that he's feeling happier. I'm happy that he's feeling progress, things like that. Sometimes with certain kids, I think proud means that they have to earn something. And that's kind of what I figured out with him, that he had to kind of measure up to that. And so I just stopped. But that just works for him because that's kind of how his brain works. So I just make sure I tell him I'm happy. But one thing I worry about the same thing because I didn't know I was enabling. I mean, I really thought when he moved home that I was, you know, he was working and I didn't know he was still using and he was paying off all of his debts. But even just him being here was enabling him. But one thing I learned while he's there is that, and he knows, he got the message really loud and clear. You know, he needs some help right now. He needs some gas money occasionally. He needs some food. He's looking for work. And so the last time he asked for food, I said, okay, I'll have Walmart deliver it. And that was one of the first times that he realized I wasn't going to put money in his account, that he could use it. And then the last time he asked for gas, my husband said, I'll meet you at the gas station. And he's got a job right now. Our neighbor gave him a 5-week job while he's looking at another one. But he texted me the other morning and asked, you know, Mom, I got to get some more gas. And I knew his sister had helped him a little bit. I just said, okay. And he says, I know I'm earning your trust, but could I take a picture? Because you can't meet me at the gas station. And I said, okay, but make sure the date's on it. And so he took a picture and he had the date. And finally, I'm understanding how to do some of that better because I'm just one that would be like, oh, I want to help you. But I realized that I have to help in certain ways. And one way was not to put money in his account because I didn't trust him with that money. He hadn't earned trust with that. So I don't know if that's helpful.
It's absolutely helpful. Thank you for the feedback, Susie.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, Cammie, do you have any follow-up feedback to that?
The only thing that came up for me was boundaries. I think that you can say anything that you feel like you need to say to them, as long as you say it with compassion in your heart. And difficult conversations or courageous conversations are helpful if you're calm and able, both in a space, to be able to have that conversation. As far as enabling, as long as there's strict boundaries, you should still love them and support them and be there for them when you can, if it's safe for you and if it's safe for them. But having those strong boundaries, I think it's great. Meet me at the gas station, or meet me at Walmart. I'll buy your groceries. That's boundaries. That says, I love you. I want to help you with some food, but we're not to the point where I give you money right now. Perfect.
I think that leads really well into this question here. A lot of families ask this: if I'm being honest with my person, is it going to mess up their treatment? You know, during treatment, early recovery. I think you kind of touched on a little bit already, Cammie, but can we be honest with people in that stage, in treatment, early recovery?
I would say yes. In treatment, they're still learning the skills to be able to hear you and to be able to take in what you're saying. So in early recovery, blasting out a whole bunch of information that may be difficult for them to process, you may want to slow it down to maybe one topic at a time while they're learning. While they're in recovery, out of treatment, yes, I think that those conversations, honesty is so important. And if you want them to be an honest person that stands in their integrity, you have to role model that. I've had a lot of difficult conversations with one of my dear friends who struggled with alcoholism, but I had to make sure that I wasn't riled up, that I wasn't reacting, that I wasn't coming from a place of emotion. I had to wait until I was able to say, hey, I'm in this space where I want to have this conversation with you. Are you in a space where you can hear it, or can you let me know when you are? So then we could have honest conversations that were calm. A lot of honesty right at the beginning can be tricky, but once they learn to navigate it, I think it's really important.
Chris, do you have any feedback on that, or anyone have any follow-up feedback on that?
I'll say ditto to what Cammie said. I think honesty is so important. Like, if we're going to build a healthy relationship and we're going to build it on trust, we got to build it on a strong foundation, right? As in the Bible, they say can be built on sand or on rock. And I think like honesty is the rock. Again, sometimes we don't want to trigger the family member, yet, Cammie and I, we're going to get triggered in life. So especially when they're in treatment, I think it's a healthy place. And I think, like Cammie said, like, don't overload. Don't like, hey, I've written a 10-page article, over the years. Let me send that to you. Do you have a fax, email? How do you prefer it? Right? Don't do that. But I think, as Cammie said, as much as you can come at it from a place of love or compassion, I think that's the question, right? You got to check in with your own heart and say, like, why am I sending this? Is it something that I'm just like angry and I want to get off my chest? Probably not the safest thing to send. Take the time, do your work. And I'll say, I had family members that didn't like go do a lot of work on themselves. So luckily I got to learn how to handle emotions and have my own boundaries and things like that. But I think, like, for the first and foremost thing is, if you help them learn how to handle that trigger, if you help them learn how to handle anxiety and how to do it different than going to get the bottle, like, it's important to have those honest conversations and have some of those triggers, maybe not a severe trigger, but triggers happen because then they learn, like, it was important for me to see liquor and for me to go in the grocery store and see liquor and not pick it up and not buy it, for me to feel like a breakup or a hard relationship, a hard conversation, and not go buy liquor or go to that thing to satisfy it. So at some point it reproved to my brain, like, I can do this different. And I think we can't just walk on eggshells the whole time and hope that somebody heals.
Chris?
Yes.
We had our counseling session with Lincoln this week, and it's interesting because my son is we do this Enneagram thing and he's a 9, which means he's a peacemaker. He's adverse to conflict. He will go to any extreme not to have conflict, right? And so when we had our meeting, his biggest worry was, are mom and dad going to think that I'm going to attack them or get mad at them? Like, he was worried the other way. Like, are they going to feel that way? And one thing I think I've learned in some of my inner work, maybe if I'm learning anything, is that I said to him, I said, Link, I said, here's the deal with us. I said, we're just average, normal parents. And I said, sometimes in our parenting, we didn't always have the tools that we needed. And sometimes maybe we didn't even have the best mental health. And I said, so there had to be times that we caused pain. And it wasn't intentional, but I can still say I'm sorry for any pain, because pain is pain. Pain hurts. We can be sorry for it if it hurt you. And so I had to kind of give him a leeway to be like, oh my gosh, we can talk about hard stuff where we're not going to equally get offended, that I'm going to be offended because, I think I was a good mom, but I also think I had times that I could have caused pain. And so I kind of had to open that door so that, I don't know, I guess I think we're also hard on ourselves at times, and we get kind of, what do you call it? When you get pushed against and someone's kind of has to tell you something. Defensive. Yeah. You kind of feel that, oh my gosh, I don't want someone to tell me something. But I finally learned that I think it's going to be healthier for my son with his personality if I can just get him to say it, get him to express himself. And I've just had to learn to be like, you know what? I'm really sorry. I'm sorry for any pain that was there. I hope that we can move past it and move forward, and let's have a do-over, you know? And so that's kind of where I've had to be, because I can't get him to deal with emotions as much. So I want him to, I don't care if he attacks me. I can handle it now. And yeah, I don't think he will, because it's not his personality.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's the most important thing is, it was really hard for me to open up to my parents and have those conversations. It wasn't always the best way. That none of us know, like none of us grow up, or I'll say majority of us don't grow up, having these kind of conversations and talking about it. So the more we can see our side of the, right, clean our side of the sidewalk, of the road, and yet open up space for that channel of communication, I think that's the best way we can do it. And sometimes it's slower coming to it, but I think anybody that has that opened up enough will eventually start to communicate.
So something that kind of stands out for me is while a person's in treatment is a really good time to have honest conversations with them, because they're having so much support, but you also have access to that support. If you have something you're not sure how to talk about or how to handle it, engage with their therapist, engage with their coach, with their case manager, ask questions on here, like how can I do this, so that it does come off in the right amount of cushion, that it's not overwhelming. Because it's difficult. There's a lot going on early on, and it does take time for people to develop those skills, those tools to be able to receive difficult feedback, and turn it from negativity to something they can grow from. And sometimes I think too, as parents, as family members, we want to unload all that stuff we've been carrying around, like that 10-page document that Chris is talking about, because it feels really heavy and we're just kind of sick of it. That person's not ready to receive it. And if we do that, it's going to create more damage than healing. So unloading some of that with us, or with a coach or with therapists, it'll soften the blow. You won't have to carry so much of that weight. And you can kind of work on your own forgiveness pattern, that when your child is ready, or your partner, or whoever this person is ready, you've already forgiven them 1,000 times. You've already had that conversation 1,000 times. It won't be so intense. And it can help it come off with compassion, as Cami said, come off with love, instead of with all that sharp, bitter, heavy, justifiably bitter stuff, or some bitter things that have happened. But you're also talking to someone that's not the same person they were before. No, they're no longer they're no longer in those patterns. Hopefully, that's what we hope that that's the case. You're talking to someone who's building a new life, and it's someone who's in a more healthier space. So I hope that clarifies a little bit. Any follow-up questions, feedback before we wrap up?
Can I just ask one? How do you, like, when we're at this stage where he's going to almost be out on his own again, and he doesn't have, any money because of what happened before, what's enabling on that end? Because we're trying our hardest to help him to live, because it probably wouldn't be good for him to come back here. I just don't think that would be a healthy space, and he's got some ideas. How much do you do for them versus allowing them to do for themselves?
Cami, Chris?
I think the more that you allow them to do it by themselves, the better, because then they're learning that they can do it by themselves. If you continue to walk them through it, then the next time they're going to need you to walk them through it. And so I think the more they can do on their own, the better. That doesn't mean like them not being around anymore, or you not being there for them. I think you still support them and stand by them through the whole thing, but allow them to do as much as they can by themselves, because ultimately they want to be self-sufficient. It feels better to be able to buy my own groceries than to call my mom. Right. I'm a more independent person because I had to start with sober living or a low income apartment and work your way out of it until you're able to take care of yourself. And I had to go through all of that in order for me to learn how to do it today without continuing to ask for help, if that makes sense.
Is it okay that like right now when we find out he's working and doing the classes at night, is it okay to like send him some job links or to send him like, he's like, I want to maybe live here, and send him applications? Is that okay to be on that end where you kind of
give him suggestions? Sure. If you hear of something that he hasn't heard of that may be helpful to him, suggestions are helpful. Now, if you went and got the apartment for him, that would be a little bit more on the enabling side, because then he'll need you to do that the next time and the next time. But if you send him, hey, I saw this apartment and I'm thinking of you, maybe we could call them, or maybe you should call them and let me know how it goes, then it's still on him to go through the action. It's still on him to make those choices, but he has you as a support, in my opinion.
I'll just say I second that. I think the way to support him is be there for him emotionally, right? Be there to like, hey, I remember getting my first apartment. It is a challenge. Like, it's difficult. But like learned helplessness is a real thing. And if we continue to reinforce that, we feel helpless. And we'll do a lot less in life if we feel like people that love us, especially, are reinforcing that we're not capable. And just, this isn't like addiction. This is just human nature. If I sit there and get a check for $1,000 each month from somebody and I don't have to do it, like, I'm going to eventually go like, that's how life works. I get $1,000. Of course, right? I don't have to work that as hard as I could. Like, I don't have to give as much as I could to life. And I just think it really is more about like, what do they want from life, and helping them see and understand that they're capable of doing that. And then reinforcing that with them with love and encouragement of like, hey, I can help you emotionally. Here's some ideas, but I'm not going to do the work for you. Because that call, like Cami said, you'll do the call next time. You'll sign the lease next time. And I get like, that's probably I think one of the most challenging things I see from the family's perspective is to like, let go a little bit and just say like, if you believe in Jesus, take the will, in a sense, like just, hey, somebody else, you got to take the will now, my loved one, and allowing them to fall. Because as much as we love the successes, we learn the most from the falls. The last thing I just want to say is, as much as you can on the falls, just support them again emotionally, be there for them to like that safe place, that love, but not that I'll brush off your knees and heck, just stay down. I'll go get it done. I think that's how we support them best. Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for jumping on. I respect a lot that you guys jump on and are here to learn and grow yourself just as much as you are here to find a best way to support your family members, because it really is a team thing. So I just want to encourage you guys to keep showing up. No matter what happens with your family member, keep showing up for yourself. Their life will get better and your life will get better from it. So we love you all. We're grateful you guys are here tonight.